Hello, everyone. Ron here from L.T.L Tutoring Central. I hope you're having a great day so far. This is another reading comprehension discussion. This is number 3. It can also be used for listening as well. There's lots of things you can do with these videos. This one is about the Canadian wildfires this year. There were a lot of them and they were huge, but there were wildfires all around the world, it seems like, practically. So I think that probably some of this information will relate to other countries as well. I'm not sure. I haven't read it yet. I like to go in cold. In other words, read it with you, and I'll have my comments. If I have any comments, I'll have them throughout reading the text. So I've only read the title and just to see what it's about, but I haven't read through the whole article yet. Before we jump in, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. The channel is growing slowly but nicely, so let's keep it going. You can check down below in the description to see how you can donate to the channel if you want to support it some more. Also, there will be a link there to the article that I'm just about to read, so you can go there and check it out and support them too. So let me share my screen. This is a Canadian Geographic article, once again, and it's called Afterburn, the New Face of Fire Puts Wildlife on the Hot Seat. How Canada's wildlife is struggling to cope with the human-induced forcings of climate change. November 1st, 2023. And this is an aerial photograph, shows the burn severity in central Yukon, so very far northern Canada, of course. Fire, fire everywhere. That's certainly what it felt like this summer as wildfires burned a record area of forested land across Canada. Fueled by drought and abnormally high temperatures, according to one calculation, the area burned in Canada during the 2023 summer season was greater than half the countries in the world, making it the most destructive wildfire season ever recorded. Yes, some of the fires were so gigantic, even just take one of them, if it was in a smaller country, it would have been half the country or something. So they were massive. And we were affected here where I am a little bit from the smoke. The air quality dropped quite a bit. There were a few stores that closed just because some of their staff had breathing issues and didn't want to risk it. But the areas closer to the fires were much worse. And of course, depending on how the wind was blowing, some areas in the States got more smoke from the Canadian wildfires than we did. And it even crossed the ocean to other countries as well. That's just how huge these fires were. As the largest forested habitat in the world, the boreal forest ecosystem has evolved with a natural cycle of fire and regrowth. Historically, wildfires in the boreal have been vital to maintaining its diversity of habitats and wildlife by creating a patchwork of new and old growth areas spread across a massive region covering almost 60% of Canada. Not only have boreal plants and animals learned to live with fire, but many species have evolved to benefit from fire. So live is in quotation marks because, of course, many of them die in the fires. But in general, statistically, they had learned to live with it in the past when it was a more natural occurrence, I guess. Tree species like black spruce and jack pine require fire to regenerate. Pyrophilus, fire-loving beetles rapidly move into fire-killed trees, followed quickly by burn specialist woodpeckers that feast on the beetle buffet and excavate nest cavities in dead trees. Well, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. Fast-growing plants and shrubs provide forage for species like moose and hares before eventually giving way to a regenerating forest, and the cycle continues. But things are changing fast. Hotter, drier conditions driven by a climate that is changing much faster at northern latitudes than in southern areas have set the stage for more frequent and intense burns across the boreal region. Well-honed wildlife strategies for living with fire, whether sheltering in water or wetlands or racing to escape the flames, are being tested like never before. Sure, this sort of unnatural, much quicker increase and change, evolution cannot deal with it. It's just not going to happen. How animals survive big fire seasons depends on more significant human-driven landscape factors. Animals fleeing from fast-moving flames may have to contend with obstacles like highways or roads while already under stress. Meanwhile, climate-driven droughts and hydro dams can leave downstream areas too shallow to provide refuge for fish, turtles, or other animals in the event of a fire. Not only do wildlife need to adapt in real time to supercharged fire seasons, but they may also need to adapt to very different conditions afterwards. More intense fires have more severe outcomes, not just burning the woody parts of the forest, but also burning through organic layers of soils and peatlands while potentially destroying seed sources needed for regenerating forests. More frequent fires mean forests don't have a chance to regrow to mature and old growth stages before burning again. Combined with hotter and drier growing conditions, the increase in fires puts boreal ecosystems on a new trajectory, with deciduous replacing coniferous forests across the boreal region. So, yes, these unnatural changes are changing whether or not plants can return, what kinds of trees or plants return. The picture on the left there, a young northern hawk owl perched amongst burned trees. A little caption underneath there. Yeah, so deciduous replacing coniferous forests. So I'll read on in case it says more about that particular piece. Even though boreal species are well accustomed to fire, these changes present new challenges. Boreal caribou, for example, need older forests that contain lichen food sources that they rely on, particularly in winter. It often takes more than 40 years for a forest stand to replenish its lichen. In the meantime, these areas are much less attractive to caribou. As larger areas experience more frequent and severe burns, species that rely on mature trees will be left with fewer options for places to go. Now that makes sense. So on the left, an aerial photograph shows wildfire patterns in central Yukon. You can see how massive those fires are. On the right, an aerial photograph shows wildfire patterns. Oh, it's the same thing. It's just a different picture. Very good. Even burn specialists like American three-toed and black-backed woodpeckers may find the new fire regime different from their liking. WCS Canada scientists studying bird use of burned forests point out that if forests burn too frequently, trees will never grow big enough to house the excavated cavity required for nesting by these woodpeckers. So I guess referring to this, no, that was a hawk owl, never mind. But they did talk about the woodpeckers, I think, before. So the tree has to be large enough in order to provide that cavity, right? Caribou, in turn, require large, intact landscapes, not only for food, but as a refuge from predators. So they need to hide out. It is already a problem when forests are divided and fragmented by resource roads, and old forests are extensively logged or cleared for mining, oil, and gas or other development. Adding a more frequent and severe fire footprint to that equation limits options for caribou to move around and find preferred areas to feed and give birth. And that's not good news for a species already considered at risk in every part of its remaining range in Canada. There's a picture there of the caribou, part of the Fort Mile caribou herd in central Yukon. I don't think I'll make that bigger in case I have trouble getting back easily. You can do that when you go to the link. Millions of Canadians felt the burn of just trying to breathe under smoke-filled skies this summer. Yes, I talked about that a little bit. Thousands had to evacuate their homes, not knowing what they might return to. These immediate impacts are even more intense for wildlife because moving to another community temporarily or staying indoors in climate-controlled conditions is simply not an option. Even our efforts to combat fire may have impacts on wildlife. For example, fire suppressants and retardants can harm wildlife and fish, especially when they enter the water. Understandably, wildland fire management strategies aimed at protecting human life and infrastructure can also negatively impact wildlife habitat, particularly when mature conifer forests are thinned, cleared of deadwood, or converted to deciduous forest through logging. So you're getting rid of the pine trees and having the trees that lose their leaves. And though any of these changes, of course, change the kind of wildlife or the volume of wildlife that's able to live in those areas. So a tree is not a tree is not a tree. So there are different kinds of trees, and they support different kinds of wildlife, different kinds of insects, different kinds of plant growth underneath them, etc. Even the soil would change after time, right? Taking action to slow the rate of climate change is vital, but we must recognize that this new fire paradigm is just one of the many climate change impacts that are here to stay. We can't expect nature to simply cope while we try to get our climate house in order. Instead, there needs to be a shift to more proactive and holistic approaches that help sustain wildlife in the face of all the changes we have triggered, the cumulative effects of industrial development and the fallout from climate heating. A good place to start would be a strong national biodiversity strategy to implement the ambitious goals agreed to under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's a mouthful, signed by Canada and more than 100 other countries in Montreal last fall. That will require all hands on deck, governments, businesses, and individuals to start reversing humans' destructive impact on biodiversity in the industrial age. A robust, multi-pronged strategy that recognizes the links between human health, reconciliation, equity, and a healthy environment will require new perspectives about what we truly value and a significant shift from the status quo. So we have to move from what we have always accepted and thought was fine. We'll just keep going the way we are going. It'll all work out in the end idea. They're saying this is not going to work. We're going to have to make some major changes. Getting everybody on deck, all hands on deck, is a very difficult thing to do. Governments have their own agendas. Businesses have a different agenda. Individuals often have many separate agendas, so it's very difficult to pull that together. That in turn can set the stage for pursuing holistic approaches that include Indigenous leadership to conserve large intact natural areas and fully consider cumulative effects in all our decision making. Only then can we make a real difference for wildlife feeling the heat of our actions. And I believe that is the end of that particular article, but you can see down below there's lots of other things to check out and sign up for the Canadian Geographic newsletter if you like. All right. Yes, very interesting, very true. Climate change is affecting people all around the world, whether we want to admit it or not. There are those that are still denying it, or those that have given up, even if they do accept it. I think, it's still important to try to do the best. As an individual, there's a limited amount maybe that you can do, but I think everybody needs to try to do their best and maybe encourage governments, vote for the kind of governments that might encourage change, and encourage things to do better, and support businesses that are trying to help in that regard as well. Beyond that, sometimes from an individual perspective, there's not a whole lot you can do unless you happen to be, in command of some government or some business. But definitely it is a concern because we see not only with wildfires, but we see with other storms, tornadoes and hurricanes, and it is changing as the oceans warm, as the air temperatures change around the world, and it's not always going to be the same everywhere. In some areas, you may have a colder winter and think, "What's happened?" Well, I thought there was climate change, or global warming, as they call it sometimes. But yeah, it's going to change as it moves around the Earth. Let me just stop the share for now. Tell me, if you like, about the wildfires in your area. If you had wildfires, certainly here in Canada, we had them in lots of different places, but around the world as well. Tell me what your thoughts are about climate change, or about what individuals can do, or about what governments or businesses perhaps can do to help with climate change. I know it's a complicated issue and there's no easy answers, because every kind of alternative energy brings with it issues and problems. Solar has issues, wind has issues. There's no I don't think there's any simple solution. Sometimes people think if we just do this, but I just don't see it that way. I think it's probably going to have to be a combination of a lot of different technologies, and perhaps we will get better and better with wind, solar, or maybe even some other new technology will come around, or we'll find a safer way to work with nuclear. But very tricky, and certainly as an individual, I think there's only so much one person can do. But if every one person does something, then it will have a cumulative effect, and and hopefully help to change slowly. And I know it's going to take time, and that's going to be a problem too, because I think that there's no switch that we can just click and everything gets fixed in 10 years even. No, it's going to be decades and decades at least. Yeah, I think people will lose patience, I'm afraid, but hopefully we can find our way through. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you have any ingenious solutions that I haven't thought of, or maybe no one else has thought of? That'd be great. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You can always contact me. Check out the website. There'll be links below, and let me know what your thoughts are. And of course, I provide personalized courses in reading, writing, comprehension, some mathematics. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out too. It is Ron from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye for now.